If you're fascinated by finance, then you need to stick around. Today, we're diving into some big questions about the future of our global economy. Welcome to It's a Complicated World After All. Is the system that governs our global finances finally breaking down? Who actually benefits from our current setup? Spoiler, it's not the struggling countries stuck in endless debt cycles. And what about this so-called age of polycrisis? Multiple global crises are happening all at once: economic instability, climate disasters, political conflicts. Are we ready to handle them? With the rise of BRICS and regional economic blocs, is Western dominance fading? Could we be heading towards a multipolar world? Whether through reform or radical change, global finance is at a crossroads. So who's going to shape the future? Hit subscribe and let's find out together.
So, welcome back to It's a Complicated World After All. I'm Gabrielle, and today we're tackling some big questions. Is the global economic system collapsing? Who benefits from the current system, and who's left struggling? And if the system is failing, what comes next? Here with me to unpack all this, we have
Karen here. If you've ever wondered why financial crises keep happening or why some countries seem permanently in debt, we're going to break it down today.
And hi, I'm Danita. Beyond economics, this is about power. The system we have wasn't built to be fair. So the real question is, can it change?
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Who actually benefits from the way global finance is structured right now?
Well, it's no surprise, the wealthiest countries, particularly those that shaped the post-World War II Bretton Woods system, the US, Europe, and their allies. Institutions like the IMF, World Bank, and World Trade Organization were designed to stabilize global finance on their terms.
Right, Karen. And they enforce rules that keep that dominance intact. That the IMF's structural adjustment programs developing nations, especially in the global south, are forced into policies like astray, privatization, and trade liberalization just to qualify for loans. But instead of lifting them out of economic trouble, these policies often make things worse.
Yes. So is this just a cycle of dependency where struggling countries borrow money, follow the conditions, but never actually break free?
Well, exactly. So countries in the global south are often trapped into cycles of debt because the system is set up to benefit the creditors, not the borrowers. And when crises hit, the economic burden falls the hardest on them.
Okay, so now let's talk about something that has been getting a lot of attention. The idea that we're living in an age of a polycrisis. What does that mean?
Well, Gabrielle, it means we are facing multiple interconnected global crises, from economic stability to climate change to political conflicts and even technological disruptions. And all this is happening at the same time and making each other worse.
Exactly. So think about it. The COVID-19 pandemic disrupted economies worldwide, which increased the debt burdens in the global south. Then came the Russia-Ukraine war, sending the energy and food prices soaring. And then you add to that climate change, which is making disasters more frequent and severe. So you got a perfect storm of instability.
And the institutions we rely on, like the IMF and the World Bank, have been effective in handling these crises?
Not really. These institutions weren't built for the world where crises are so interconnected. They reactivate, not proactivate. And often their responses are like forcing economic adversity and just add to suffering.
Yes. So with all this instability, is the current system actually breaking down? Is Western economic dominance fading?
So what we're seeing is some real challenges to the world order. So in the old order, it would have the US and the allies at top. However, the BRICS nations such as Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are now expanding their influence. They've created the new development bank, which would be an alternative to the IMF, and they're pushing for de-dollarization to move away from the US dollar as a global reserve currency.
And this also goes beyond BRICS, as there are regional economic blocs like the African Continental Free Trade, which aims to make Africa less dependent on Western-dominated trade systems.
But does this mean we're heading towards a multipolar world order where power is more evenly distributed?
Well, possibly, Gabrielle. See, US and the Europe are still holding the significant economic power, but the rise of China and the strengthening of regional blocs and shifting trade patterns suggest that the unipolar Western-led dominance system is eroding.
But the shifting power doesn't automatically mean a fairer system. It depends on whether these new economic blocs can actually address global inequalities, or are they just there to replace the same power structures in a different form?
Okay, well, let's go deeper into the system itself. The Bretton Woods system created the IMF, the World Bank, and later the WTO. Is it still working, or is it falling apart?
It is definitely under strain. Remember, the system was created in the 1940s, mainly by the US and its allies, to stabilize the post-World War economy and to prevent another Great Depression. But it was always designed to keep the global north in control.
That's why in the 1960s and 70s, organizations like the UNCTAD argued that the systems disadvantaged the global south. And in the 1980s and 90s, the IMF and the World Bank pushed neoliberal reforms, free market policies that often depended economic struggles in developing nations.
And now, with growing debt, trade imbalances, and economic instability, is the system reaching a breaking point?
So if the global south keeps getting locked into the cycles of debt, while alternative financial institutions rise, we could see a major shift in global finance.
All right, let's talk solutions. If the current system is flawed, what can be done? Can the rules of global finance be rewritten?
So there are calls for reform, but meaningful change is tough when the G20 and the major financial powers still control the system. However, if enough countries push for some change, like demanding fairer trade rules or restructuring global debt, we could see some shifts.
But reform isn't enough. If it's just tinkers with broken systems, some argue we would need a radical rethinking of global economic governance. That's one of the decentralizes power and gives more influence to the global south.
And if reform fails, could we see a completely new system emerge?
Possibly. That is where the BRICS Plus, the New Development Bank, and other alternative institutions would come in. If they gain enough traction, we could see a new financial order emerge that is separate from the IMF and the World Bank.
But then it depends whether those systems is actually better or just reshuffling the global power. It remains to be seen.
So where does that leave us? The global economic system was built to serve the most powerful, but cracks are showing. As crises pile up, the question isn't just whether the system will change, it is who will shape that change.
And if the global south wants a fairer deal, they'll have to fight for it. Power isn't given, it's taken.
Exactly, Karen. Whether through reform or complete overhaul, global finance is at a crossroads, and the question is, who will write the next chapter?
And that's why it's a complicated world after all. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Are we witnessing the end of Western economic dominance? See you next time.
Bye.